My husband just doesn't bring home the bacon anymore.
Now I bring home the Sizzlean.
Don't bring home the bacon. Think lean. Bring home the sizzle.
Sizzle into number 3 argument of the top 5 reasons against a vegan diet. That my culture isn't vegan. Let's focus on the number 3, that my culture isn't vegan. We all have excuses against why to not choose plants, but there's one thing that I think we can all agree on around the world. What about sexual dysfunction in relationship to what you eat in animal proteins? Let's find out.
What are some pill-free ways to improve your sex life? Exercise, quit smoking, don't drink too much, don't weigh too much, and eat a healthy diet. But what does that mean? Heart-healthy lifestyle changes are sex-healthy lifestyle changes, as has been demonstrated in studies from around the world, including in women. Sexual function in women is also significantly affected by coronary artery disease, atherosclerotic narrowing of blood flow through our arteries, including the arteries that supply our pelvis. So high cholesterol may mean lower arousal, orgasm, lubrication, and satisfaction, and the same with high blood pressure. So putting women on a more plant-based diet may help with sexual functioning. Researchers found that improvements in female sexual function index scores were related to an increased intake of fruit, vegetables, nuts and beans, and a shift from animal to plant sources of fat. And the same with men, a significant improvement in International Index of Erectile Function scores. In fact, the largest study on diet and erectile dysfunction found that each additional daily serving of fruits or vegetables may reduce the risk by 10%. But why? It may be due to the anti-inflammatory effects. 2 years on a healthier diet resulted in a significant reduction in systemic inflammation, as indicated by reduced levels of C-reactive protein. Fiber itself may play an anti-inflammatory role. Those who eat the most fiber tend to have significantly lower levels of inflammation in their bodies. The opposite was found for saturated fat, associated with an increased likelihood of elevated C-reactive protein levels. This is how we're used to seeing changes in inflammatory markers over weeks, months, or years. But people don't realize that the level of inflammation in our bodies can change after a single meal. For example, there's a pro-inflammatory signaling molecule in our bodies called interleukin-18, thought to play a role in destabilizing atherosclerotic plaques. As such, the level of interleukin-18 in the blood is a strong predictor of cardiovascular death. What would happen if you fed people one of 3 different types of meals? Sausage and egg butter oil sandwiches, or cheeseless pizza with a white flour crust, or the same cheeseless pizza, but with a whole wheat crust. Within hours of eating the sausage sandwich, interleukin-18 levels shot up about 20%, an effect not seen eating the plant-based pizza. And those eating the whole food plant-based pizza had about a 20% drop in IL-18 levels within hours, reinforcing dietary recommendation to eat a diet high in fiber and starches and low in saturated fat to prevent chronic diseases.
If your culture still makes a meat treat, or thinks that Spam is a food group, then it's time to take action and think about what your food is really made of. Here we see some billboards in North America supporting the vegan movement. I wanted to find out how much are we eating, and this chart shows multi-country analysis, and the meat trends are rising. We have this insatiable appetite for flesh, and we are increasing how much meat we produce and eat around the world. This is coupled with our increasing obesity epidemic and illness epidemics such as cardiovascular disease, heart attack, stroke risk, and diabetes. When we adopt a whole food, plant-based vegan diet, we can help moderate some of these illnesses that our modern world is crippled with. As you see here, this is hip fracture incidence and vegetable protein intake, which has a negative linear relationship. The more vegetable proteins you eat, the less likely you are to have your hip fractured. Let's return back to our number 3 reason, that my culture is too animal-laden. I couldn't simply adopt a plant-based diet. Let's see what Dr. Campbell and his researchers have to say.
It is so counterintuitive. Eat meat, eggs, cheese, lose weight. NBC Chief Science Correspondent Robert Bazell tonight with a new study.
Here's the most important thing to remember. The studies on these foods
takes on one of the biggest diet debates. Is it more important to cut carbs or fat if you want to lose weight and stay healthy? Here with what the researchers found.
Is one healthier than the other? Is one healthier
I
than the
think
other?
low carb,
is healthy?
metabolically and nutritionally, is healthy.
Good News America. Beef, eggs, butter, and tropical oils all back on the menu with a thumbs up from many experts.
The government altering guidelines for cholesterol consumption. More and more health experts are taking a fresh look at saturated fat foods that have been on the don't eat list for decades.
There's really no evidence to show that the low-fat diet has any advantage, and now there's really compelling evidence to the contrary.
This latest study was run by the Harvard School of Public Health. The study compared 3 diets: a low-fat diet, a Mediterranean diet, an Atkins-type diet, where people did not worry about calories but replaced carbohydrates, mostly with protein and fat from fish, chicken, and vegetable sources. Some experts worried about their health risks, especially cholesterol and other risk factors for heart disease. The Atkins-type diet was the winner, with people losing an average of just over 12 pounds.
These findings, though, are still going to be considered, I would guess, controversial because this was funded in part by the Atkins Foundation.
Packaging was always very seductive.
All in the media,
the whole
and magazines.
media is about being thinner, being skinny, looking this way, and if you eat this way, you will have the body you want, you will have all the energy you want.
Start losing weight today.
I have tried probably every diet that exists. I've tried them.
But what makes the work that you learned about in China so important, so revolutionary in that regard?
Well, my work actually started many years ago in the laboratory. And one of the first things that we did that I found very exciting, we could turn on and turn off the development of cancer, the progression of cancer. I'm here to talk about health.
When people have a bad diet, that's when they need the Viagra, right, Doc?
Absolutely.
And you're 77, you don't need it, right?
No.
So in November of 2011, my dad and Dr. Esselstyn, his colleague, were invited to speak to the legislature from the floor of the Kentucky House. And Kentucky has some of the worst health statistics in the nation.
The topic that I really want to share with you, it really has to do with the way we think about nutrition.
We obviously were flattered that he would give us some time, and we were gracious enough to be listening to what he had to say. I mean, you could hear a pin drop in that chamber, I thought, which was unusual for the chamber. All the members were so attentive. They wanted to learn. They wanted to hear.
What is so exciting is the fact that all you have to do to make yourself heart attack proof is change your biochemistry internally.
I found this staggering.
My dad's and Dr. Esselstyn's talks that day were historic. Never before had the idea of plant-based nutrition been presented from the floor of a state legislature.
So there you have it. Thank you very much for your time.
My dad got a very enthusiastic response, and he was so excited he called me up the next day, and that's when I got involved. At the time, I'd been working on an idea for a nutritional intervention program in North Carolina, and I sensed an opportunity to do the same thing in Kentucky to demonstrate the health benefits of a plant-based diet to the Kentucky legislature. I was highly motivated to do this because I knew my dad's research well, including a study that he had done in China, the most comprehensive study ever done of the relationship between diet and disease.
And so the China study was really an opportunity in a human setting to see if what we were learning in the laboratory had any bearing for a human population. Well, at the time that we were organizing the China study, we knew that for about a dozen different cancers, they were very common in some counties in China and much less common in other counties. Just that observation was interesting. I also was aware at that time that we couldn't really look at single nutrients and what role they might play. I was thinking of nutrients collectively working as in food. So the object of the China study was for me to measure as many things we possibly could.
My dad's research team collected blood, urine, and questionnaire data from 6,000 patients in 60 counties across China and measured a total of 367 variables. Then they let the computers go to work, searching for patterns among nearly 100,000 correlations that might indicate the relationship of food to disease outcomes.
As I looked at that body of correlations, I could see patterns emerging, somewhat like a hologram. You stare at this complexity and suddenly you start to see something emerge. And when I saw all of these variables in the food together with stuff in the blood, comparing it with all the disease outcomes, we tended to get the same answer, that the closer we would get to a whole food plant-based diet, the healthier we would be, and the less disease we would incur. And that in turn was consistent with what I previously had been doing in the laboratory, and what in fact also existed in literature from other places.
My interest in the opportunity with the Kentucky legislature also stemmed from my knowledge of the history of this idea. For many years, researchers have suspected that animal protein is not optimal for human health. This information has sometimes bubbled to the surface only to get buried in a sea of misinformation because of the influence of industry and government. A perfect example of this was in the late 1970s with a Senate committee chaired by Senator George McGovern.
So the McGovern Committee held a series of hearings and published a report, Dietary Goals for Americans. The Dietary Goals for Americans realized that many of the problems, the chronic diseases, were related to the increases in saturated fat and cholesterol and sugar, refined carbohydrate consumption. And so there was this shift towards we need to move towards some of the foods eaten by societies that weren't plagued by these chronic degenerative conditions. So if you look at the populations around the world that are not dying of our 10 leading killers, it is rural Africa and rural China. And they have kind of, in one sense, remarkably different diets, at the same time actually remarkably similar diets. Without those studies that showed people this remarkable variability of disease rates around the world was not genetics, right? It's not just that people have different genes, but when you transplant people, they acquire the disease rates of where they're going, and generation after generation it gets worse and worse as they lose some of their traditional plant-based eating and start kind of accumulating this kind of Western lifestyle. And I think it was in that environment that the McGovern Committee said Americans need to shift their diets towards a more plant-based diet. The report first came out January 1977, but was kind of beaten back by some of the politics as such that there was kind of a much watered-down report by the end of that year.
I have pleaded in my report and will plead again orally here for more research on the problem before we make announcements to the American public.
Well, I would only argue that senators don't have the luxury that a research scientist does of waiting until every last shred of evidence is in.
The greatest pushback came from the meat and egg industries, but the sugar industry called McGovern a puritanical do-gooder. The Salt Institute came out very strongly. The dairy industry wanted the goals scrapped. So not only did the agricultural lobby win in terms of changing the wording of the report, but they had the entire Nutrition Committee disbanded. And so, I mean, it really changed even how nutrition policy was going to go forward in the federal government. Hey, I mean, you look at, and these political reverberations continue to this day.
I saw good people making really stupid decisions. They didn't want to get crosswise of the mainstream. The mainstream being greatly influenced by the corporate sector.
Dairy products, nature's most nearly perfect food. And remember this, Tom, where the demand for other may fluctuate over the years, not milk and its products. Because folks need milk every day as much as, well, almost as much as the oxygen in the air.
I just saw these outside forces coming in and shaping our knowledge. Not only shaping our knowledge in very narrowly focused ways, but also working hard to keep this from the public.
This is what is laying to waste. I mean, the most likely reason our loved ones will die is heart disease, which is completely preventable, treatable, often reversible. I mean, and so, I mean, people should be angry that they don't know.
We can see how any culture that is not adopting a whole food plant-based diet will suffer from these various health problems. This is atherosclerosis, or hardening of the arteries. So it's not really your culture that is not eating healthy, but more of the types of food, how much, how frequent, the variety that promotes or degrades our health. All right, to recap, we have crushed number 3 of top 5 reasons against a vegan diet, that it is not part of my culture. We can find and veganize any recipe around the world. Stay tuned for number 4 and number 5 reason against a vegan diet. You can find the link below or go to my website at theveganfoodscientist.com, Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter accounts. Like, comment, and subscribe below. Thanks a lot, guys, for watching, and have a great day.